Howdy, folks. It is Meandering Mike in the Man Cave of Madness. It is after midnight, and we are doing our after-action review of the game Lettow-Vorbeck East Africa, 1914 to 1918, from Decision Games. It's part of their mini-game series. It is the Hand of Destiny series. There's multiple series in the mini-game series overall. This is a really mini-game format. There's 5 titles in the Hand of Destiny series. Most of them are supposed to be 19th century. This is obviously the earliest 20th century. And there's one of their titles that's in the 18th century. But 3 of the 5 are set in the 19th century. So besides doing an after-action review of the game, I'll mention how the game ended and some thoughts on the game and my strategies and different strategies, and looking forward to playing it again. And then I'll also discuss some reading material, as I like to. I don't do it all the time, but in some of my after-action reviews, or I like to include that. So, first of all, well, what happened? We last saw the game where the Germans were sort of in dire straits. They'd taken some big lumps. We had drawn the card for the British for the start of their next turn, and it was this attrition card. So potentially they could have been slowed down. Actually, you can't see that very well here. Not that you can actually read it. But basically this card calls all Allied infantry units to be rolled forward, and they have a 1/3 chance of dying and going into the Recruit Cup. Well, the British luck held, and they rolled, better than average. Only had 2 units go, even though on average it would have been like 3 or 4 units should have gone bye-bye. And so we continued on. They were fighting the Germans. The Germans were trying to do their best over here, trying to establish a fort, trying to keep 2 spots. The Allies hurt the Germans more. The Germans next card on their 4th turn, no reinforcements. It was the Battle for the Lakes, which is a historical event that there was a bunch of fighting on Victoria and Lake Tanganyika, and historically the Germans lost their quote unquote their navy, their river boats, their lake flotilla, whatever. And so that's the effect of this card, is the Germans could no longer use that lake movement, and they get no recruitment for this card. So the Germans didn't get anything more. What did the Allies get on their last turn, 5th turn? Because they succeeded in wiping out all the Germans. They got this card. They got them 3 new recruitments. Now, not very high in the movement here. They got to move all their units, but they were already close enough to the Germans that that was it. They were able to swamp the Germans and wipe them all out. So yeah. So the 5th turn, that's the 3rd turn of 1915. So before 1915, Paul von Lettow-Vorbeck and his crew were wiped off, and so not a very historical result. So some of my thoughts on that strategy-wise. So my plan early on for the Germans was to hopefully try to strike where the British were weak, particularly in Abercorn, northern Rhodesia, where there's just a 1-strength garrison. The Allies did on their very first turn. Remember, the Allies set up first, so they have to commit to a setup. Then the Germans get to set up, but the Allies get to move first. So if the Allies get some good recruitment the first turn, they can react to how the German sets up. And in fact, they got one that had 2 recruitments and this naval support, where they got the bonus strength on. So that's where they got the big plan on invading the navy on the coast, and it worked. So even though they were only invading with a 1 and a 2 strength Indian expeditionary force, it was a pain. And just things went crazy from there. So I still think potentially there's a good possibility for the Germans to plan to maybe attack one direction or the other. Maybe instead of splitting them up, saying, oh, well, I can go here, here. The Allies managed to thwart both by recruiting a guy here, by getting a guy over here and moving one, creating the fort here where the Germans had started here. So they couldn't get in to attack, and since the Allies were attacking, they maneuvered down here. Now over here, my Germans should have said, forget it. We're not going to attack here now. We're going to go respond. We're going to run here as fast as we can, which, of course, they couldn't have gotten too far because, they were starting here and there's mountains. In retrospect, I would start the Germans here. So as long as they don't get a weird card that only allows them to move one, they could move into here to attack, and then you could move back this way faster. So, lesson learned, this would be a better staging spot for the Germans on this side than here. This is still, I think, is a pretty good spot. And, if the Allies did decide to try to attack them here, they'd be in the mountains, so their elite light guys would be definitely having a good chance of having the tactical superiority and all that. In general, in this playthrough, I was more risky with both sides, and on average, the British got better luck, the Germans got worse luck. There was one case over here where the Germans had, a 2 dice attack, and they rolled 2 6s. So that was good. That was their luck. That was it there, where they, boom, had a big shoot, and, they won that battle. But besides that, so I would play in the future a little more conservatively with the Germans, go for the long game, be prepared and look for opportunities to come across the border and potentially hit weak Allied spots. But always be thinking about, protecting yourself. You've got to make sure with the Germans, the rules as written is the German recruitments must come on in an occupied supply center. So the Germans must, or fort, they must leave, multiple spots because if the Allies managed to storm the whole coast, so keeping something, in here, maybe building a fort in the interior here or something, just like got to have a spot, right? This is a case where, maybe, again, in this mountains, having a fort, by you sitting here and keeping guys here, you can bail out either direction because you're starting here. And guys that you recruit there, they didn't move. They just arrived from recruitment, and they could move out. You can move the turn you recruited. You move into a mountain or jungle or something, you have to stop. So there's some thought, here, some of these spots are not bad. Well, maybe, that's right on is that, where is that in? The border goes through, but it's more like in British East Africa. So, again, the border goes through, but I would say the bulk of this is on this side. So we'd have to look. Count Mount Kilimanjaro. Is it here or here? That's supposed to represent Mount Kilimanjaro, right? So that's interesting that they have a number of these guys that are bisecting, not true bisects, not going right through the middle, but are cutting through or intersecting through those spaces. Does the fact that this have some on this side of the border, can you say, well, it's partly in Germany, East Africa, that's where the Germans are always in supply there. That's one thing, the Germans are always in supply. We never ended up getting a case where units were fighting out of supply. There was a point where it was close for the British at the end, which you didn't see, that was off where they came steaming across from here. The Germans had split up here. The Brits that were here, they had taken Bismarck, and then they were going to attack the Germans here, and guys were coming across here. These guys, while the Germans were still holding this, these guys normally would have been out of supply. You got to be within 2 spaces of a friendly supply center. And for the British, that's, anyone that they occupy. Well, that's just more than 3 away, except there's the rule that if you are on the railroad and the railroad can trace any distance that's not blocked by enemy units to a friendly supply source, so they could trace back to here and actually we're in supply. But that's something to remember. In some cases, you might be out of supply or not. So that's something I'd like to get clarification. To me, this is definitely in German East Africa. That I would say is in British. The vast majority. If the center of the square, the space, the circle, the triangle, but the space is in the other country, and this one is here. So for supply purposes, it makes a difference for the Germans because they are in supply anywhere in German East Africa. But for recruiting purposes, they can only recruit in an occupied supply center or fort. All right. So that's my thoughts about strategy and that. The more you play the game, the more you become familiar, like what units are in the pool, what kind of cards are coming up. I knew some of the cards. I had not read through them all, but I had, known about the Kriegsmarine unit, the Königsberg Marines, and that they had to have a port to be able to bring them in. And since I knew that, the British knew that, and that was part of their strategy. And they never prevented it, but that caused them to go aggressive, and their aggressive paid off with good luck. Yeah. So definitely my intention to play again is be more careful with the Germans. Always make sure somewhere you've got a fort, preferably relatively interior. And again, the more you stack up, the better you can fight, but the better, if the enemy is all stacked up and come after you, you could lose a major one. I think the Germans might need to be more prepared to break off more often than I was like, let's stay and fight, and maybe they haven't gotten so desperate early, like, we got to win this, that they could have done that better more often. So experience will tell on that one, and I think that definitely the more you play, the probably the easier it is to start to feel the ebb and the flow of the Germans. They do have a lot of advantages in that, they have those interior line of communication, sort of, they've got guys out here potentially that they're facing. Some people call that surrounded. Going back to Napoleon was always happy when he was quote unquote surrounded. He liked the interior lines of communication, and he could strike out this way, and if you have enough troops, if you have the right situation, if you have enough speed and reaction time, it can be a great advantage. But if things go bad, things can go really bad. It's like at Leipzig. Napoleon was kind of feeling happy. I'm on my interior lines, but oh wait, no, there are more and more coming, and I haven't demoralized anybody. Oh no, we're surrounded and we're retreating and we're getting cut off, and yeah. All right. More thoughts about the game itself. Again, this is not a full review because I've only played it the once. It only lasted 5 turns. I learned a lot from it. I'm definitely gonna play it again, but. I like the system. It's relatively simple and easy, and there's still more experience to inform the ebb and the flow of the combat and an idea for what size forces are going to do good against which kind, and it is very dependent on that tactical. The initiative, as I keep calling it, the tactical superior, tactical leadership. They call it different things in different places, and we'll talk about that some more. But yeah, who goes first and which guy shoots and how good you might get lucky early on or not. But boy, I'll tell you, like having a stack of all elite guys is really powerful, because then all the 4 results, panics, 4s only affect non-elite dudes. And if you have nothing but elites, you are immune to the 4s. If you have a mix of elites and that, well, the elite helped you, get a bonus on your tactical superiority die roll, and you can't assign one. But like, if you still have non-elites, they can take that 4 panic until, which would also mean if you had 1 elite and 1 regular guy, and you got a panic result against you of a 4, you'd have to panic the guy. If the next turn, say they could do another panic of a 4, you'd have no choice but to destroy the non-elite guy, because you can't apply it to your elite guy. So that's a case where you couldn't say, I took the panic results and I'm going to retreat. In that case, nope. If you rolled a 4, it doesn't get applied at all to an elite guy. Only the 5 panic results. And do remember, as I mentioned, that is only true of this one of the 5 of the Hand of Destiny series. Normally, both the 4 and the 5 are normal panic that don't affect elite units. Well, in this game, you can panic the elite units by rolling a 5. In a fort, the fort protects you from any kind of panic. So it also protects the elite dudes. So some of the people were saying that the fort's really powerful and that the Germans should just like take a fort, plop it somewhere, and stack up all the units in it. And I still think that's not a good idea. Because then you've put all your eggs in one basket, and basically it becomes like a siege. Because if you do, let's say, you're going to want to be able to get more recruits, right? So that means you're going to have to put it like here, or maybe way the heck over here. Not there. That's a town, but that's not a thing. You probably don't want to do it on the coast. Even though you would say, well, put a fort on the coast and hold out. You're hoping to get that Königsberg Marine Infantry. Here's a reason why you might not want to put your fort on the coast and then hold up there. It's that naval support card. If you're holding up here as the Germans, what I would do as the Brits is I would probably start to collect all my guys in the Allied Indian Ocean, or on any port nearby. And you're waiting to get this card, because each Allied unit attacking in a port on the Indian Ocean has its combat strength increased by 1. Again, you don't actually have to invade. You could stack up outside nearby and just come in and attack the port, and you've got the bombardment, right? So you could either be prepared to do it navally, or every single unit here is getting +1 strength. Now, I've not gone through and checked every single card, but so far this is the only card I know that affects combat strength. Tactical roll. Normally, they'll give a bonus to tactical roll if they affect anything tactical. I mean, being out of supply, you reduce 1 from your tactical. Yep, that's the only card, but it's every single Allied unit. So if the Germans are held up, even if they're in a fort, every single Allied unit's going to add 1 to their strength. And being on the port here, there's only, 1 or like this port, Rufiji Delta. It's not an actual town and supply center. They wouldn't be there, but if you did hold up there for some reason, like this one only has 1 way out. You can easily park and cut off, units. So when you're ready to attack, if you've got a big British stack here and the Germans are just squatting in their fort saying, you could come to get me, I've got my fort, I'm going to have no panic results, and they just wait to get this card, and they go in with every single British unit, each one getting 1 more strength, right? So their little ones are shooting 2 dice, 2s or 3 or 4, and somewhere there's a 4, which actually can fight it. So it'd just be like really bloody, and you have enough dice that you're going to get, extra chances for 6s. And so even though you might be taking panics back, you're going to do enough kills that you might not wipe them out in one turn, but next turn you'll probably get them or something. I don't know. That's just a thought. Okay. Maybe not do the fort thing. So anyways, talking about the fort, and some people saying, the fort's too powerful. Until I see the Germans win a couple games in a row, and I'll maybe try that strategy, is like everything on the fort and just see how it is. And then you look and say, well, if you put all your eggs in one basket, what can the Allies do? So yeah, the fort's important. That's something you can retreat to, or rebuilding it, moving the fort. Remember, it's flexible. You got to pay attention to that. So depending on the situation, you may pick up and move, but you want to have a fort out and about to make sure that you're having a supply situation. So that's why I think it's best to put a fort in a place that doesn't already have a supply. Don't try to say like, well, here's supply in a town, and I'm going to put my fort here to make it easier to hold this supply. It's like, well, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Spread out, spread a little bit. Have multiple places where you're trying to have your guys stay alive, where you can run to, and all that. That's my thoughts. So, anyways, we're blending back to the specific experience. Well, we're talking about the game in the overall, right, and what the mechanics present to you, what kind of strategies that are there. Is there quote unquote a dominant strategy? That's a problem with a game like, if you do this, you'll always win, and that's sort of a bad thing if it's too easy. And I don't think it's as cut and dried as some people were saying on Board Game Geek, that they thought that the fort was way too powerful. But we will see. So back to those rules issues. The rules aren't horrible, but they're not great. There are inconsistencies. There's advantages and disadvantages to system rules games, okay? By learning one system, you have a leg up. If you say, hey, I'm going to learn the Hand of Destiny system, and there are 5 games out there that use this system. Now, one of them said a little earlier, one of them said a little later. You can tell, like in this one here, there's certain advanced rules available here that you don't use at all here. Some things override. They call some things different things, so that naming of stuff and the format of the counters. Well, this says, elite units have an E, and this one has an arrow. Well, that's not a horrible thing. That doesn't end up changing the end functionality. It affects the form over instead of function, but you can figure it out. But confusion, right? It'd be nice to avoid those confusions and be more consistent. So if you do a systems rules, try to make sure that it's as consistent as possible. You have your general exceptions, which are expected. Here are the rules of the specific game. But don't rename things when you don't have to. Don't call something tactical superiority here, tactical leadership role here. And I don't know why they just didn't call initiative, right? Or tactical initiative or something. I don't know. Sometimes people want to make up their own terms for things. They don't want to borrow. But it's like, in the world of gaming, there's certain standards, like video games and user interfaces. And, do you right click? Do you left click? Do you do this? Health bars on units. Well, green means you're healthy, and yellow means you're wounded, and red, you're close to death. Those things make sense. Why reinvent the wheel, right? Now, obviously, you don't have something quite like that in a board game, a tabletop war game. But, this game doesn't have zone of control, but don't necessarily call it something else. If so many war gamers used to the term zone of control, well, probably use the term zone of control. If your zone of control is different enough where it doesn't represent a zone of influence or a reaction region or something, maybe you have a reaction range, where you don't necessarily stop a unit that's moving, but like you have some kind of equivalent of an opportunity fire or a barrage attack or something that if an enemy's moving by you, I'm thinking about like a hex encounter war game kind of thing. You might call it something different if it's different enough, but if it's the same enough, use an accepted term. Don't try to be fancy and make something up, which I don't know. I've seen it enough in different games that sometimes that's weird. But anyway, so don't be scared of, say, for example, these systems. Because, oh my God, there's these issues where there's confusions. Yeah, they're there. But in general, if you want to get your bang for the buck, these lists for $14.95, most of these are in stock on Decision Games website right now. You can find them often cheaper at some online retailers. So not very expensive. You can invest some time learning a system. I'm not just saying this, but there's a number. They've got quite a few systems that, might be the kind of combat you're interested in. There's like Raiders and Commandos series. There's like a musket and pike equivalent series. They don't call it that because that term was used somewhere else, but maybe they do actually do that. There's a fire and movement system, which is different than the fire and movement system that was way back when from Fire and Movement magazine and all that. But you can leverage your time spent to learn a system and maybe play a couple, 3, 4. Some of this their system rules have like six games in them. Some only have like 2. But I think they're good value. They're worth your time in general. These mini game series from Decision Games. Some people say like, I don't like Decision Games, or I've heard bad things about them, or they call them a name other than Decision Games. It's not really flattering, but on average, you can find this is worth. I mean, you're not risking much, right? If you go ahead and just spend $15 for a game that you should be easily able to get your money's worth out of it, right? This day and age, you go to see one movie by yourself with, one small popcorn and you've spent $15, right? And that's for an hour and a half to 2 hours of entertainment. So certainly you'll get more entertainment out of this. I'm not sure if I really have any more comments about this. Again, like I said, I think you should play with all the advanced rules in this game to really, the supply for the Germans, the fort, the break-off rules. I think it's important. I think you should play with them. If you have a total newbie that's playing, maybe you cut those out just to give a first start. Or maybe you play through a couple of turns or something without it, and then say, okay, let's start again with all the rules. But yeah, I think the nature of the campaign in this one, you want to use those rules. So let's go on to these reading materials over here. There they are. So I've got a lot more books on World War I in general. I only pulled the ones that are specifically about Africa or this campaign in particular. Now I'm going to try to pull these out here without everything all falling over. This one is a good, just starting introductory armies in East Africa. This is Osprey. It's their Men-at-Arms series. So I'm going to pull this back. I'm going to tilt this down. And if you're used to these, the first thing I usually look for is, I'm going to need to pull back one, is the color plates for the different armies. So, what did their various troops, sergeants, officers? No, I need to go back another one. No, I'm going in. So, there we go. German Schutztruppe sergeant and Unterofficer. You got your naval guys, regular officer. So there's the Germans, their native troops here. Musikchor, Polizeitruppe, Bascha Ruga. British troops, along with some of their Maasai warriors, Dorobo warriors. More British troops there. Now, so the British also had Askari troops. So I'm not sure exactly what Askari means specifically, and what language that is coming from. So the main German native troops were called the Askari, but evidently the British also had Askari troops. All right, South Africans, and boy, do the South Africans they're a big force in this game. That's one of the swingy things of this game is when do the South Africans come on? And more British troops, Nigerian brigades, Gold Coast Regiment. So this has stuff that includes, like, there was action in Togoland and the Cameroons and that. So this isn't all specific just to East Africa. There's Belgian troops, the Belgian Congo. Let's see, was there one more page with the Portuguese? Yes. The Portuguese troops, Colonial Army, Metropolitan Army. So this book here has, talks about the kind of troops, gives a little bit of background. It doesn't go into a lot of depth. It's got a nice situational map here of East Africa. No, this was East Africa. This wasn't the whole thing. But even though they did mention some of the troops coming, I guess they were pulling Liberian troops over. the British must have. So Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika here. This is where the Abercorn in northern Rhodesia, where the Germans were hoping to attack. This is Bismarckburg. So they're very, very close right across the border from each other. The Germans ended up losing that. There's Tabora up there. So that's actually a fair distance. So there's, jungle and mountain here. Mount Kilimanjaro is way over here. Here's there's Portuguese. So right there is the Das El Salaam, where we had our first the naval invasion. Mombasa's up here. Nairobi's over here. So all these ports up and down here. So that shows various comings and goings. The thicker arrows are the Allied offensives, and the comings and goings of the Germans, where they're penetrating, attacking, retreating, are in the dotted lines of the Schutztruppe, the German forces. So there is where did it go? Was it right back here one? There's a chronology, I thought, in this one. Oh, yeah, here. So here's the table of content on the inside front cover. So they split up into the initial campaigns, a large Allied offensive of 1916, and then sort of the stalemate period. So they split it into three periods. There's a lot going in within these. Like here they talk about General Smuts and the South African Expeditionary Force. They didn't come in until 1916. Historically, while in our game, the Allies got them, what was that, the end of 1914 or the first turn of 1915? So it was like a big deal getting them that early. Now, historically, the big naval invasion by the British was at Tanga, and they just were repulsed, and they had a really bad time. So if you want to look at a playthrough by Charles Lettow on his channel of Tonga 1914 from Legion War Games, they had a lot of problems, and he was like, all my Indians are seasick, and they're on the coast, are not recovering, and we're running into killer bees, and all this bad stuff was happening. It's quite an endeavor. Let's see. I think there's also here, they talk about the sinking. The Königsberg eventually gets sunk. I can't remember where that is in here, but I know there's another place that has in a different book. So let's look at the next Osprey book. This is much thicker, at least like twice the thickness. And it covers the same period, but it is focused more on the campaigning overall. It has a lot more maps. It has a lot of photographs and sketches, but also some large 2-page spreads of artwork. That's kind of glary there. I'm trying to get that. So there's at least 3 or 4 of those. I'm going to bump to those first so you can just get a glimpse at those. So those are pretty cool. I mean, that's the Königsberg getting sunk in the Rufiji Delta. Yeah, so here's a map. Here's the Königsberg. All these German shore batteries, but the Allied ship sort of snuck in. Her Majesty's Ship Sovereign and Mercy. Was it his or Her Majesty? I can't remember. And they managed to sink the Königsberg. So let's look here at the beginning. They've got a big chronology here. So you can, from August 5th, 1914, all the way through. So Lettow-Vorbeck surrendered after, they finally got word. It took a while, right? Because it was, in middle November when the armistice was, 11/11/11/11, so it was 1918 and November 11th, the 11th hour, 11th second, 11th minute, etc. When the armistice, when they stopped the fighting, and he didn't surrender until the 25th. Took him that long to get word and say, oh, okay, well, we're done. Let's look at some of the maps in here. So there's some overhead maps of particular battles. So this is Tanga. This is that great invasion. There's like beaches here that the British and Indian troops landed on, and then they were trying to fight their way in, and total mess. There's bigger, higher level campaigning maps. Okay, this is just an overall positional map. The other campaign maps, I think, are later. Let's see. I can find. Oh, here's a different battle. The Nigerians at Mahiwa. So yeah, the battle ones are at this what I call a 2.5D perspective. They're like at a 45 degree angle. It's not overhead, it's not side view, but it's coming in, and they call it, at least in computer games, they call that the 2.5D perspective. Okay, here is the campaigning. This is the 1917 offensive, with basically the Germans running all over the place. In this one, the Germans are in red. The British and Belgians. So I guess the Germans had invaded Portuguese East Africa, and they were trying to push them out, coming in, and knock them all over. Let's find another one here. Yeah, here we go. This is the 1916 Allied offensive. So now these reminds of the British and Belgian guys coming in. Trying to come in and cut the Central Railway. Let's see, I think there was one here. Well, there's a assault on Salaita Hill. It's just a particular battle. But yeah, as you can see, quite a lot of interesting references in here of various aspects of that. So this one looks really cool. I haven't finished the whole thing yet, but now the next one I'm going to do is, let's see, hopefully those books don't fall over. They probably will. Lean. There. Resting on Scully. All right, so this one, this has lots of maps and pictures and illustrations and all that stuff. This one is very narrative. This has, I think, 2 tiny maps, and it's just got, a few photographs, but it's mostly a discussion. It's got more, maybe a half dozen to a dozen photographs. But yeah, even flipping through there, you don't see the maps. Like, I think there's 1 map for Togoland, 1 map for the Cameroons, and then 1 map for East Africa. Yeah, okay, actually 4 maps. So we're just looking at the East Africa part. Now, what I want to praise this book for is the awesome index that they have here. There's nothing better than a really well-crafted index. You look at this section here for Paul, Emile, Von, Lettow-Vorbeck. Look at all those entries here. There is like 46 different pages referenced here in about 40 entries, because some of these are like double pagers. But then there's also, combination entries. So Lettow-Vorbeck and airplanes, where Vorbeck attacks Kabata, decorations, health of, him and Hoskins, improvisations by, when LV loses the Amani, the medical care in Portuguese East Africa, etc. So there's all these, and Smuts. So Lettow-Vorbeck and Smuts. So Smuts, the South African leader, where they fought and maneuvered around each other and all that stuff. When he surrendered, all that stuff. So it covers the dude, but also very specific topics related to the dude, where you can dig into things better and find stuff that you want to read. I mean, if you're not reading it straightforward cover to cover, but you're referencing or whatever, you want to know where to go and read some more, this kind of index is just fabulous. So I'm going to say half the book is East Africa. So it's the index starts there. So the stuff starts about 361 there, the epilogue. And so the Königsberg, that's the fleet that came, the ship, not the fleet, the ship, war comes to East Africa. Okay. So war comes to East Africa. There's more there. Chapter 9. South Africans, conquest. Okay, so first the South Africans were kicking the Germans out of Southwest Africa. Came to be known as Namibia. And that now there. So starting on page 105 through 361, that is the war in Germany, East Africa. There's their map. So the one map of that. Now, one of the things that was interesting that is mentioned a bit in this book was the fighting that they did over the rail lines, and trying to do damage to them and trying to rebuild them. That there was a lot going on in that aspect, which isn't covered in this game. There's rail lines there, but there's no way to damage or destroy them or rebuild them there. So this game does have a simplification in that aspect, that there was issues with that in the real fighting, the status of the rail lines, their usability, their destruction, their creation, reconstruction, etc. And I think it's maybe a good idea. It's like for a bigger game, you would want to add that element. But for a mini game that you're trying to have playable in a short period of time, leaving it more like just here's a rail that you can use, and if guys are on the rail, you got to stop. You can't rail past them, whatever. That's a good compromise, I would say. So this book, great resources. So I would between these two, it's like get them both. I mean, like I'd be hard pressed to decide one or the other, right? So, if you like to buy a lot of Osprey tales, start here and get this. This doesn't have specific examination of the troops and the weaponry of each army. They've got pictures of them. There's probably some discussion of that, but it's more about the actual campaigning. So, especially if you're into miniatures and such, and you want to, paint miniatures, or if you just like, this has a good order battle up front. But if you want to know more about, the guys and what they look like and what they're armed with, this is a good place to start. But if you just were going to go and only could say, I'm going to get two, I would recommend these two. Now, what we have over here is autobiography, memoir, and biography. So this is the man himself, Paul Emil von Lettow-Vorbeck, My Reminiscences of East Africa. So I believe there's a couple different versions out there that you can get relatively cheap. This has those nice illustrations. So all totaled, that is about 300 pages before 326. So I have not yet started. Oh, interesting. It almost looks like this is one of those reproductions where it's not like retypeset, but it's like a photocopy of like the original hardback book or something. It's some of those have really bad resolution. This looks like relatively good, but you see some of those weird artifacts, little specks of dots of this and that. But it makes it cheaper than trying to go find original editions of this stuff. So this is something I definitely want to read at some point. I haven't got to it yet. And then Battle for the Bundu, First World War in East Africa, Charles Miller. This is a hefty tome, Macmillan Publishing. So there we go. Nice big map there. The key on the front end paper map, the arrows represent the marks are transposed. Interesting. There, errata. There's errata in the book. We're used to errata in games. There's errata for the book. So there's another Eastern Africa Theater of Operations. Back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. All right, and let's take a quick look at this guy's. This is also one that I have not had a chance to look much at all. But letting you know of its present. The overlords, the antagonists, Black Year. It's interesting when you say Black Year, but you don't actually name the year there. So if you're scanning through, and well, when is that? Like, I don't know. You got to go in and dig it. So this is, it seems a little more literary, it's going to be a narrative, a biography of events. Slim Janie's Plan, 15 rupees for bloody English. The Nomads, Across the Wide Rovuma, Strange Surrender. Yeah, well, he didn't have to surrender. He could have kept running. He was successful that time, but the war was over. Yeah, the Rufuji, that's again, or the Delta, where the Black Year. Wanting to know how far do we have to scan before we can tell what year actually is the Black Year? My eyes are not seeing it. Well, anyway. So, Meandering Mike, the Man Cave of Madness, we're Duel in the Sewer. Okay, this is, okay, early months of 1915 here. Watery compost pit of the refugee delta. All right. So I'm going to call it good there. You can see some of the stamps of whoever owned this. RHPOA. Now, that seems like an institution, not a person's name. Does anyone know what RHPOA stands for? There was something else here. History, classification. It's like a library book, but not exactly a library book. It's got a stamp. January 04, 2022. So it wasn't actually that old. Now, I'm sure that's the date that they got it or the date that they decided to get rid of it. But yeah, I got it for relatively cheap myself. So that's why. A nice used copy that was decent enough shape, but was quite inexpensive. I think it was like $4 or something like that. Plus maybe like $3.99 shipping on Amazon. So, Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness. Here's some potential things. So, again, I have not read this one. Looks interesting. I mean, more and more detail. Obviously, an autobiography, memoirs. You know, you can't go too wrong there. Even if, you know, who knows how much of it's true or not, how much is spin. But given this is the guy who told Hitler to F off, he literally told Hitler to, you know, Hitler afterwards, Hitler wanted him to get involved in the Nazi party. So, you know, this is years. This is in the 30s, you know, Hitler coming to power in the 30s. And he said, fuck off. Excuse my French. But yeah, definitely these two, from what I've read and browsed, these are, again, good bang for the buck. Like the game, if you want to, like me, don't necessarily want to read everything, I would recommend these two first. If you're completist, get them all. But and if you know of any books on this, interesting perspectives that you know, might not be contained here, you know, let me know. You can put a comment in there. You can suggest that stuff. So, Meandering Mike, Man Cave of Madness. This was our after action review and reading list discussing the game here. Oh, and of course we can't see that. Lettow-Vorbeck East Africa, 1914 to 1918. From Decision Games, one of their smaller format Ziploc bag, you know, half a page. You know, it's 8.5 by 5.5 mini game series. The particular series is Hand of Destiny, one of the 5 in that series. It's point-to-point movement. It is I go, you go, but in combat they have, you know, tactical superiority decision, and units alternate firing back and forth after a round of combat. You re-roll that initiative, that tactical superiority, and the next one. Or if you get to the point where one side can't fight anymore, they have to retreat away. Certain units can break off early. Seems to simulate a kind of a guerrilla warfare that, you know, makes sense in the time of World War I. Breaking off, trying to decide your battles, you know, maybe getting caught a little bit where you'd, you know, if the attacker, like if the British come in and they have tactical superiority, they can start shooting up, and the Germans might not be able to break off until then. The Germans have mostly troops that can break off, whereas the British have a good proportion of troops that can't. So they can't take advantage of that as much, but they do have some. So it's, you know, not totally like asymmetric warfare, but definitely the Germans are more suited to fighting that kind of guerrilla action, in that, you know, they're going to be in supply anywhere in Germany, East Africa. On average, they have more elite units, they have more light infantry. On average, their movement cards tend to, on average, give them a little more number of units that can move, or the movement allowance of each. It's not an egregious imbalance between that, but they have all these little edges. They're a little better at fighting this kind of thing, but both sides can sort of do the same things. So in a sense, it is not, asymmetrical warfare in that they're, totally different weapon systems and style that are just, completely different. It's not that, and that's the real meaning of asymmetrical warfare. It's not just like, oh, the sides are not equal, they're not identical. That's not what asymmetrical warfare means. That they're just not equal. So yeah, let's call it quits there. It's 55 minutes. I'm hoping for about a 30 to 45 minute one, but as I tend to meandering Mike, we discussed a whole bunch here. So anyone who's still listening, thank you. It's hard to believe that people actually listen to the end of these usually, because I do. It's very close to Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you all. I guess I got a photograph from one of the people that won a game in the December giveaway, and they've got it there at their tree, their first present there. So I posted a picture on the my community tab. Now, keep calling it community tab, which is it is a tab still in the browser interface, and I guess it's sort of a tab in the phone interface. Anytime in any of my videos where I mention the About tab, and if you want to contact me, my channel email, the About information on the browser from YouTube is no longer in a tab. There's no longer an About tab. Where you go to the channel page, under the top it has the name, and it's got the number of subscribers, and it's got like the channel handle. So mine's like at Meandering Mike's Man Cave. There is then a little arrow to the side that has About information. You click that, and it opens a pop-up window now. So it's no longer a tab. So every time I say About tab, actually click the About pop-up window. And in that, there's various information about like when the person, started their channel, and, if they have an email, there's a place to click there. Now, I haven't checked yet, but maybe on the phone app, they now have a place to find that email, because before you couldn't. You could only find it in the About tab in the browser version of YouTube and not on the phone. Maybe now, because it's a pop-up window, they can do the same code base for both, and it might be there. So anyway, it's Meandering Mike's Man Cave at gmail.com. If you want to email me about anything, if you want to give feedback about the channel, whatnot, discuss possible collaboration. If you're a YouTuber content person, can always discuss that kind of stuff. Kind of busy for the next couple of months, but there's always possibilities in the coming year to do some kind of collaboration and whatnot. So again, anyone else that, won a prize this December or anytime this year, if you wanted to show, here's what I won, go ahead and send me an email on the channel. Or if you have if you already have my other personal email address, you can use that, but I prefer in general if you try to use the channel email. And especially if you're sending me a photograph, don't send me big photographs, big high-res things. You go ahead and do, smaller things. But definitely if you're sending me an attachment, send it to my Gmail account, my channel thing. And I can post on my community tab, that's still a tab, and show people, hey, this is what you want. If you want to share, maybe you don't want to do that. That's fine. There's no obligation at all to do such thing. But anyone who's won something over the past, year and a half of me doing giveaways and stuff, and that if you want to share and say thanks or just nice. I'm trying to share the love out to the community, make sure people, can use these spare games that I have. That I have multiple copies of things. That's what I've been giving away. I'm not giving away things because I want to get rid of them. I'm giving away things because I have duplicates, right? And even occasionally I've bought things on sale, so I have extra copies to give away. So sometimes it's just, oops, I made a mistake and bought multiple. And other times, like, no, I specifically want to have a copy to give away. So anyway, take care, everyone. Merry Christmas, all that good stuff. Ciao.